Thank you for stopping by to see this week's video. I hope you enjoy it. This week we're going to be doing a ring, which we're going to make out of antler. But we can use almost any material to create that special memory. If you enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, as that will help grow my channel. If you'd like to subscribe, I'd appreciate that as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave those and I will respond. Again, thank you. So here's this week's project, and I've done one of these previously, but I decided to do another one. And this time it's going to be a little bit different design. So I've started off with the antler. You can see that here. So off the lathe, I've rounded it up here. And antler is very, very hard, especially the outer skin, the brown part. Once you get into the inside, it gets a bit softer, but still very, very hard material. Much harder than wood. But this is down near the root of the antler, so you get a lot more color variation. It's also bigger. But you can see here some of the color variation in it. So I think that's going to turn out nice. When it comes to making rings, you have a lot of options. For this video, I'll be using a black tungsten ring. And it has an inlay channel for the material to go in it. So the first thing I've done here is I just measured the diameter, inside diameter of the what will be the inlay, and then found the drill bit that's the closest to it. So then I just drilled it out. You don't need to do that. You can do it all with the carbide tool, but I prefer to drill it first. That way I've got a good straight edge, and then I use my carbide tool to just make it a bit larger if necessary. The other thing that I've done here, and you'll notice in a moment, by standing over top of the carbide tool and comparing it to the lathe bed, I can make sure that as I'm pushing it in, that I'm cutting straight, not at an angle, because I don't want the hole to flare out or in. Once it's cut, the next step was to part it off the lathe and then just to take and sand it down. I'm still coming off the lathe just a bit wider than the channel in the ring itself. So I just sanded it down a little bit by hand until it was a nice snug fit. Now, because I have a solid channel inlay, in order to get the ring in there, what I need to do is I put it in a vise and then I snap the ring in half. Unfortunately, this one broke in 3 pieces, but that's okay. Once I put it back together again, the crack where it broke is almost unrecognizable. I can find it because I know where they are, but most people would never see it. The next step is to take some epoxy, and this is a 2-part epoxy, so I mix it up, and then I use that to place it inside the inlay channel on the band itself. Making sure that I've got good complete coverage all the way around. I just use a toothpick to minimize any spillage that gets on the ring itself. And then I put the pieces that I've sanded down to fit and I mount them around the ring. I also use a bit of CA glue just on the ends to hold them together. Again, at this point, I want to put some pressure on it so that those gaps close up and are unrecognizable. Once the epoxy is set up, I return the ring back to the lathe onto my mandrel, a piece of wood that has been turned down to match the inside diameter of the ring. Then I use my carbide tool and cut the ring down until it's flush with the ring itself. Once I've completely turned it down with my carbide tool, then it's time to begin sanding. Sanding just gets you to that final dimension and removes a bit of material and makes it smooth. Here I had a little high spot, so again I just touched it up with my carbide because again the material does not sand very easily or very quickly. Now the other thing you'll notice here that what I'm also doing is collecting a little bit of the antler dust, and you can see that on my carbide tool, and just off screen from the camera I'm just collecting that and putting it on a piece of paper. I want to use this dust later on just to patch any areas that may be a small gap between the antler and the side of the ring, or the areas where the antler had been broken on the vise. Here I'm just using my fingernail and checking to see whether or not the antler is proud of the ring itself. I do not want the antler to catch in any way, so it's important that the edges come down and meet the side of the ring. A final sanding here to just make sure that, again, I don't have any area that's proud. Remember earlier I had been collecting a little bit of the dust from the antler itself. At this point, any spot that feels like it might be a bit porous, I just take some glue and some of that fine dust and press it into those porous spots so that they'll fill in any areas or cracks. Now I just hit the glue with a little bit of accelerator, which just helps the CA glue to set up almost instantly. And then I can begin sanding right away to remove any of those high spots that are remaining and just to make it nice and smooth. So I started with 120 grit sandpaper, went up to 600, and then I switched to wet sanding with micro mesh and went from 1,000 up to 12,000. At this point, the ring is really starting to shine. I also just took some sawdust, both from the antler and some wood that I had, and just burnished the surface. Again, just bringing out the shine a little bit more. At this point, I start to apply the finish. So with this, I just use CA glue and paper towel and rub it in. Now I use probably 5 or 6 coats so that I can build it up. And again, this gives a very, very good finish that will last for many, many years. Once I'm done with the CA glue, I move over to my buffing wheel. The buffing wheel has 3 applications, a triple E, a white diamond, and a Canuba wax. And the ring gets all 3 of these treatments. just to bring out that extra shine. Hopefully from the pictures at the end, you'll be able to see just how shiny and glossy the ring is. This is a special ring for a friend of mine, and the antler was actually from a deer that he had shot.